There we go. Hi. Hello, everyone. It's anxiety. No, your eyes are not deceiving you. I am not Rudy Caceres. I am on tonight as the lead host of the host extravaganza that is SPSM Chat. We are on tonight with the, I should tell you about myself. And then I'll tell you about everybody else who's here, because that's how we prioritize things here. Everybody needs to know about anxiety first. No, I'm kidding. Hi, everyone. It's anxiety. I am a mental health. Can everybody hear that awful hissing sound? No, just me. Cool. All right. It's really killing me. I'm going to leave the studio and come back in just a second. But so, hi, everyone. It's Anxiety, or also known as Marie Shanley. I just published a book. I am also a mental health advocate and live streamer on Mixer. What I do is I chat to professionals and those living with mental health issues to bridge the gap in knowledge. And also, I work to break the stigma by talking about mental health topics, all happening on my show. And then I also write about all of that, including my experience. I am a survivor of childhood trauma, so this episode is very near and dear to my heart. I am going to next go to Danielle Glick so she could tell us a little bit about herself.
Why do I have to go next? I'm Danielle. I'm a child and adolescent therapist. I work with a lot of traumatized children. That's all I got. I don't know what else to say.
Hello, my name is Hudson Harris. I am a behavioral health systems designer. Lived experience with childhood trauma. I mean, don't we all? I'm very excited to talk with everybody tonight.
Hey, I'm Quinton Clawson. I'm a clinical therapist. I do YouTube to make educational videos, and also a survivor of childhood trauma.
Not the surviving childhood trauma part. That part really sucks, but it is excellent to have you here. Thank you so much, Quinton, for being on here. I appreciate everybody giving their introductions. Behind the scenes, we have the incredible Krista Marie doing her thing, producing this whole jam of jams. So we're going to jump right into it. Yeah, I think so. We're going to jump right into it. Let's go. Question number one. Is it possible? Is it ever truly possible to get past child? I'm laughing only because of technical issues. None of this subject is funny. We're very, very serious and buttoned up here. But is it possible to ever truly get past childhood trauma? In my experience, I will kind of start by just talking through myself, of course. But I have found that I don't know that I have gotten ever away from my childhood trauma, but I've definitely gotten to the point where it does not define me or run my life or make decisions for me anymore like it used to. But I would rather hear what our professional Quinton Clawson has to say about it. Quinton, over to you.
Yeah, so I think definitely you can get past it. Nothing ever makes it go away, or the experience itself, but you can definitely work through it and get past it. And really what we look for is that it doesn't impact your day-to-day functioning. It doesn't impact your ability to thrive.
All right, understood. Hudson, what have you to say on this? What have you to say when you're not muted?
I was looking for the perfect animated GIF. It's I'll find it and I'll post it. But it's like, it's yes, but also no, but yes. Like, it to me, it's something that it's where you were, and so like getting past it, like you're already past it, like you're here in the present. But it's something that's going to based upon how much help and how much therapy you're willing to do. It's how much it controls you. I like to think for me that it adds flavor and it makes me just interesting enough at parties to be fun. And I try and work it through in therapy so that it doesn't, come out in a bad way.
All right. And Danielle, also a childhood trauma survivor and has a story herself. Let's go to you. Tell us what do you think?
What was the question again? Sorry, my phone was just blowing up.
You're fine.
Is it possible? Yes and no. I'm going to go with that as my answer. I know that I'm 36 years old and I'm still working through a lot of my childhood trauma, but I'm also working with children who are working through their traumas as they're happening. So I do think that it's a combination of the people that surrounds you as well as the help that you receive and learning coping skills and kind of just resiliency too. Because I think some people that I've worked with like literally never get past what's happened to them as a child. So there's that.
So like I think that's an interesting part of it is that if you put kids in environments where they're never challenged and they never have to like fight through anything, like I don't know, like you don't want to like throw them into like the pit, but like I have 2 kids and like I've literally had like child psychologists be like, you have to let them suffer. Like you have to let them fight through things. You have to let them, work through things. And like, that's the hard part. Cause like, as a parent, I'm like, I want you to be resilient. I'm also tired of listening to you scream all the time. So how do we like get past this? Cause there's a fine line between that. So, and I know the childhood trauma that we're talking about is obviously not something that's like coached, but you know what I mean?
I do understand that. I've actually run into that issue in terms of like seeing kids who clearly have not dealt with anything and have just been like coddled and taken care of. And that is definitely an issue. And like you said, it's not like you have to throw them into the fire, but just letting them handle life's hurdles. I think parents think that they're doing their kids a favor by like taking care of things for their children. But teaching them self-sufficiency is like super important. One of the, I'm trying to remember the author, but the guy who wrote The Coddling of the American Mind, he talked about the fact that he lives in Brooklyn in Park Slope. And so he's gotten into the practice of getting his little girl who's 8 years old, walk from one end of the park where his house is to the other end of the park where he works and teach her like to via cell phone, get her own way via GPS, knowing that she can call if she's freaking out or she's lost or something like that. And like get from point A to point B and actually create like the stakes are super low, but it's still a nervous environment for the kid. But I'd rather like, right. But it's a safe place to fail, but it's also like, that is a skill, asking strangers, how do I get from point A to point B sometimes, like all of those are skills that I feel like kids might be lacking now. Quinton, what do you say?
I think something that stood out to me about that was that in working with kids, a lot of them have a real fear of just getting started, knowing like going in that they're going to be talking about, potentially this thing that they went through and they're potentially going to have to relive it. They don't even want to tip their toe in the water, so to speak. And if you can at least get them to do that, the rest kind of happens naturally. But there's a huge fear of, processing or getting through that trauma of even trying.
It's really funny, as a child of the 80s and 90s. So my walk across the park, I flew alone for the first time when I was 5.
Yeah.
And then because of my parents being divorced, I flew every other weekend from, Texas, Maine, Kansas City, all the way back to St. Louis. Like I was like a gold member on American Airlines in the 3rd grade. Like my park was like halfway across the country. And like, so it's interesting now because I look at my own kids, I'm like, I would definitely not be doing that.
Why is that? Like, why be more? Because I flew when I was 9, and I mean, like you just tell the stewardess that here's an unaccompanied minor, and I got from point A to point B. Like on the plane, you're safe. You just need to make sure that they're met on the other side.
5 and 9 is a pretty big. It's a pretty big gap, I think. Like my 8-year-old, I'd probably trust to do it if it was. No connections, but like I still remember like getting stuck in an airport like in the 3rd grade and have to sleep in a hotel because my connection didn't make it. Like, yeah. My park was a little more complex.
It's a little bigger.
But I'm doing the same thing with my kid. Like I'm teaching him to walk to the corner across the street and go to like the little market. But like it's like building them up so they can like do those things and then also fail in a way that is safe-ish.
Right. Danielle, do you have any thoughts on this? Because also child psychology.
I'm just like listening to you guys and thinking about some of the kids that I work with and some of the stuff, like I can't talk about it.
Sure.
So that's just where my head is because I'm always thinking about work and it sucks.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, your work is relevant, so it's totally okay for you to think about
Yes,
it.
I just need appreciation.
I wanted to say I am so sorry for those of you who are trying to watch this on Mixer, and I hope you're watching this on Twitter. We're having technical difficulties, and we just did not go live. It did not go live on Mixer, and I'm really freaking bummed out about it because I think the only way is to like end the broadcast and restart. We're not going to do that, unfortunately. So please, I hope everybody rejoins us here. But also everybody who's watching all over the Twitter and the Facebook and everything sphere. Hello, and welcome, and nice to have you. We will not be sharing the screen, but I am going through and am going to notice people who are saying stuff. I don't think that there's a lot going on just yet. I see Danielle tweeted. I see Krista tweeted. So so far so good. I see Hudson tweeted. It's quiet. I promise we're here. I hope we're here. Are we live?
Friends watching.
I want to make sure that we're live, because if we're not live on Mixer, maybe we're not live on Twitter either, and that would explain why it's like super. Oh no, it says we started a broadcast. There we are. All right, I don't know what's going on. I'm really sorry, but for those of you who are here, you champs, and we appreciate you even more. Don't forget to add your responses to question number 1. We will definitely come back around to them with hashtag no, it's at SPSM Chat, hashtag SPSM. I got this. Rudy, we need you back. Come back. We love you, baby. We don't know how we hurt you, but please come. No, but he is doing an awesome thing today and doing a public speaking event. So best of luck to him. Let's go over to question number 2. Why is it important to screen children for trauma early? And how do we do so? Quinton, if you could start us off.
Yeah, sure. So it's important, kind of like how taking care of a wound early on is important. If you leave it, it can just get worse with time, just like a wound. And so if you can screen them early and begin treatment early, you tend to see less of both the short-term and long-term effects that come with it. There's a couple of screeners for it. The one that I use most often is the Child and Adolescent Trauma Screener. And so it's a 2-page screener. And the first page has yes or no questions about different traumas that a child may have experienced. And then the second page is specific to any of those traumas that you really want to focus on. And it asks basically if any symptoms have appeared recently, and if so, to what degree. And based on that, we can pretty much get an idea of whether or not what they're experiencing is clinically significant, if it needs treatment, or if it's something to keep an eye on, maybe engage in like self-care or coping skills, something like that.
Understood. All right. Next in our lineup is Hudson. My God, our producer is so on top of it. Thank you so much, Krista. Hudson, what do you think?
So I'll speak to the first one. The second one's a little out of my wheelhouse, just in terms of how to do the screenings. I'll say that a lot of the work I'm doing right now is on social determinants of health and looking at how to provide kids with support in crisis. And like the early screening is like the best possible way to get them early. Long-term, outcomes, even short-term outcomes, all get better the sooner you intervene. Like, my little one has some sensory issues and some different challenges, and like we started intervention super early. And I'm convinced that the reason he is doing as well as he is because we started so early. Like the kids' brains are super malleable and super resilient, kind of natively. And then I think once you get those things done early, you can hit it. And I think the other part of it is also it lets people do needs-based assessment, so that areas, if you screen a lot of kids early, then you also understand what they're going to need, not just now, but what you need to start hiring for in a year, in 2 years, and on down the road.
Got it. Danielle?
I just think it's funny because as you guys were talking, I found this pile of papers sitting right next to me, and these are all different types of screening for adolescent PTSD, which I think is very appropriate. So my agency, we do it very differently, and it's been very helpful. We basically take an entire family history. So we sit with the parents and talk about their traumas. It's kind of a variation of the ACEs, which we call ICE, the important childhood events, so that we can figure out how their traumas connect with the way that they parent. And then we do family history looking into, substance abuse, mental health, and how like their environment really kind of impacts all of that. Like I was talking about with Quinton before, a lot of the kids that we work with come from Child Protective Services or coming out of institutions like, you know, juvenile detention centers and psychiatric hospitals. So we are kind of lucky in so much that a lot of the kids that we get had prior screening, but we do our own on top of it. And we don't, or at least I don't dive right into that stuff. Like we take our time building rapport with these kids so that they feel safe. And then, you know, when we feel like it's appropriate or we feel that there's a certain amount of comfort, that's when we start talking about it. I'm working with a kid right now who's got pretty bad trauma. And I was shocked that he just blurted it out at me the other day. I don't use one tool specifically. It's just kind of a culmination of everything. And I like to cater it to what the child needs. And how they are, because not everyone does the same thing. So I could have like 15 different assessment tools with me, but they might not work for, I don't know. I have a lot of little kids too. So I can't sit there and be like, so tell me about your suicidal thoughts for the past 6 months. Yeah, that's my answer.
Do you track those digitally?
No, I
That's what
carry
blows my mind.
tons and tons of paper with me every single day.
Oh, it's such a bad practice. You lose all the value of the data. And like I've worked with hotlines before where they're like, we do all these screening measures. And I go, can I see the data? And they're like, here's some paper. And it's like, that doesn't really help anybody. Like you gotta capture, like, at least in my opinion, it's gotta capture that data. That's the only way to really start to mine it.
Well, we do input data every single week, because I don't know if I've ever explained this to you before, but my program was developed by Yale. So every week we have to put stuff in and send it back to Yale. So we do input data, but not day to day. It's just more about like, you know, face-to-face and giving actual therapy. And one thing that I really like, I found awesome about my agency is we're all trained as play therapists. So we do a lot of art therapy and play therapy. I swear I'm like a champ when it comes to Uno. I even have this, look how tiny this deck is. So we do a lot of that because the kids, you know, are more inclined to open up and talk about their traumas and all that stuff when they're completely distracted, or at least in my experience. But all of that does go and get put into a computer system and right back up, because my program is actually part of a longitudinal research study. So fun time.
I think that's an important point though, because there are a lot of agencies that still use paper charts, and you can't compile data like with the incoming clients that you may have. You know, you can't compile data that might show trends or correlations or things like that could be useful to treatment.
Brashy Abramson asks, is the distraction like EMDR? I actually am not familiar with that.
That's eye movement desensitization. I can't remember what the whole thing is, but I'm getting trained and certified in it soon. So the tools that I use for distraction are absolutely nothing like EMDR. I don't do tapping. I don't do any of that stuff. It's all like verbal. Like I said, it's all play based. So the other day I was with a 13-year-old. I can't because this kid is a pervert, but we were building with blocks, and I do a lot of drawing. I like projective testing because they don't realize what we're doing. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, ooh, you're feeling depressed. Look at those lines. I don't know about you, Quinton. I'm
not trained in EMDR. There are therapists I work with who are. Primarily, I use trauma-focused CBT.
That's another thing I'm going to get trained into. There's so much stuff I can't.
The EMDR's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Thank you.
And just from what I've learned about it, basically through eye movements and hand movements, you basically recall a distressing moment, a traumatic event, and you're reassociating it basically so that you don't have the same response that you normally would. And there's a lot of evidence for it. I do know that there are professionals who have their own issues with it. But I mean, from everything I've seen, it's incredibly effective.
It's been incredibly effective too for their kids.
But I mean, like was said earlier, not everything works for everyone. And I think differentiation is very key, whether it's a screener or a specific type of treatment or even the therapist. If it doesn't work for an individual, you know, you should find, you know, something new or something different that might help.
Well, that's the other thing that always gets me is that it's not just like they'll use different things. It's that, like what Danielle talked about, like, you know, I don't just go and like ask the thing. I've taken my kids in and had like the person just be like, hey, does this hurt? And it's like, okay, let's ease up just a little bit here. Like, I get you're getting to the questions, like ask around the questions. So there's a lot of training there as well that I think is important to like do it right, not just read the question. Yeah.
Right. And rapport building is.
Did he freeze?
Yep. For a little bit, but
Am I back?
You're back.
I was going to say rapport building is probably the most important part to me for the therapeutic process, at least when it comes to trauma, because if they're not comfortable, how could they ever talk about, you know, possibly the worst moment of their life?
Right.
And I think, you know, taking as much time as you need to build that rapport so that they feel safe and comfortable and to go through that with you is so incredibly important.
And yeah, I mean, this one kid that I was talking about, I've been his therapist for like 5 months now. So the one thing that I hate about the program that I work with is that we only take the kids for 6 months at a time. And I'm about ready to close him. So he just told me about his trauma last week.
Oh.
And I'm like, come on, kid. We did everything that we could, but we also have to work around crisis because we are also all crisis clinicians, and I have had to hospitalize dozens of times. I don't like to hospitalize anybody, but when this kid is not safe, or kids that I work with are not safe, or even adults, I've had to hospitalize parents before. So it's kind of hard because we have a limited amount of time at my agency, and so that's one thing I'm really excited about going into private practice for. So, yeah.
Yeah, and they do, you know, I've noticed agencies or, you know, especially if there's some type of state contract or something, they are very, they notice time, how much time you spent with a client, where you are on progress. And I think, you know, depending on the client, that time can be so important. You know, they may need that time that other clients may not need.
I agree.
It's really interesting, like you say that on some of the design work that we're doing. I've worked with trying to get people to understand that like a doctor that's checking you for primary care can work in, you know, 20-minute increments or, you know, whatever the appropriate amount of time is, but that psychiatrists, especially with children, they don't, like that model doesn't work because, you know, like you said, a kid is going to need more time in some situations, less in others. And sometimes, like, I mean, I know, like, having taken my little in, there's times where he just wants to play and like he just wants to be able to be in a space and not have to talk and just wants to play. And sometimes that's okay. So it's interesting. And like, how do we start to change the paradigm around that for, you know, was it value-based billing or some of the other stuff where it's not the individual unit? I mean, fee for service is broke, but like, how do we start to characterize what kids need in terms of like long-term outcomes? Like, and that gets back to some of the data pieces as well. But it's just interesting to me, like how I still have to educate people that behavioral health works so vastly different than other types.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much. You guys are amazing. We're going to hop into question of, I'm looking over at Twitter, and thank you so much to our producer for quoting and making sure that the best highlights of the show are being posted. If you have a question or have any answer to any of our questions, it's at SPSM Chat, hashtag SPSM, so that we can please find it. Thank you, everybody who moved over from Mixer and is watching. I see you. I see your comments. Thank you so much for being here. MS Pam, yeah, is agreeing with us that rapport is a really big thing. Thank you. Jeff Vader says games are the best. Blocks might be a good one too. Yeah, you guys are doing amazing. Okay, question number 3. In cases when our family members are those hurting us, is it healthier to repair those relationships or remove them completely from our lives? And I actually have opinions on this one. So, but I would love to start with Quinton.
So I think it's really a case-by-case basis. I think both can be true. I think there are cases in which, dependent on the family dynamic and the family members, that it's just no longer healthy for there to be a relationship, at least to one of those individuals. And then I also think there's cases in which, when a family member is the one that is hurting someone, that you can repair the relationship. And I think a lot of that comes down to, like I said, the dynamic, the individual family members. And I really think to some extent that becomes a personal choice for the person who is being hurt. Where are they at, and how do they feel about where the relationship can go from there?
Hudson?
I'm just about to post a meme about this because I was talking with someone about this today, and like, I think it goes to the individual person. There's times where healing that relationship will have power in their recovery down the road. There's times where not healing that relationship and making the decision to cut off or move on will have power down the road. And so that's where, like, you really have to, I think either way, you need to try and process and work through it. But that healing of the relationship it's a personal choice, but it's also like, how good is your therapist? How are they able to read the situation, what you can do, what can happen? Little kids being told to like heal the relationship with an adult that's hurt them or traumatized them, that can create long-lasting effects on them of, their trust in authority figures and, their attachment style, like all that stuff. So that's a tough one. Punt.
Danielle, let's go to you before we go back to, people have opinions on this one online, so let's go.
See, the problem with the way I'm going to answer this is that I work with children, and I think that sometimes you're not able to remove yourself from the situation, so you have to work around it the best that you can. A lot of the kids on my caseload are also teenagers, and I see that, like you were just saying about like attachment styles, like this one person in particular that I'm thinking about, like, still loves mom and dad, even though this kid was abused like crazy. And what I'm actually doing as the therapist is trying to get him to realize that you don't have to love them just because they're your parents. I don't know. I think it's like a case by case kind of thing. I've cut off relationships with people who abused me, but I am also a resilient person, and I've become better for what I've been through, I think, sometimes. I hope. Yeah. I don't think that's, some people are just not capable of moving past the things that have happened to them. I mean, like I said before, I'm 36 years old and I'm still dealing with stuff that happened like when I was 9. But it's also because I'm finally allowing myself to let it go and work through what's happened to me. So it's also about where the person is.
Right. I think this question largely stemmed from a few things. One, whenever on my show, whenever I talk about whether it's better to keep a kid in with their parents who might be not treating them well, or removing them and bringing them into foster care, that becomes a really heated discussion. And then part 2 of that really heated discussion is the fact that some people in their adult lives sever relationships with their parents, and then it's very socially not acceptable. It's very much perceived as a like my parents don't perceive it as just like a capricious thing that I'm doing because I'm me and I'm such a drama queen, and that's okay. That's okay for them to look at me that way, and I'm comfortable with that at this point because having them in my life was way more scarring and stressful on a day-to-day basis. But like you said, with kids, that's not exactly an option. I removed myself from the situation as soon as I could, as soon as I turned 18. But for some 18-year-olds, that's not even an option. So I want to kind of move this question back around to ask Quinton and Danielle specifically, in what cases is it better to actually remove the child and bring them into foster care versus keeping them with their parents? Does it have to be like really, really severe? What are how does that work, I guess?
That's such a difficult question.
It is. Yeah, I know it is. That's why it gets real heated real fast in my stream.
I mean,
that's why.
I can tell you, I think one of the difficult parts about my job is there are so many things I am powerless about when it comes to the kids. If they stay with the family, if they have to see, the alleged perpetrator again, all of that's kind of decided by the court system pretty much. And usually, I shouldn't say usually, sometimes there are cases when I really do not agree. I know that where I work, in the state I work, it would have to be a really bad case for them not to try and reunite. For me personally, I think if there is a chance that we're going to be seeing, long-term damage to this kid, whether it's emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever it is, that it should be considered. And I think to some extent, our system doesn't have the resources to support that, though. And I feel like that's part of why they push so much for reunification.
Danielle?
Well, so I've only really worked with like 1 or 2 foster cases, and I think that sometimes people forget that it could actually be worse for the child in the foster home than it was in the house. And that's not something that's really discussed enough, in my opinion. Fortunately, the kids that I've worked with that have been in the foster care have been in really good environments where they're really supportive foster parents, really supportive foster siblings, and they're actually given the space and the opportunity to work through what they were going through before they got there. And here also reunification is a big thing that is encouraged here. And I see that most of the time, the one thing that's holding people back from reuniting and whatever is financial. And I think that really sucks too, because they're not pushing the parents to get the treatment that they need. And also, I mean, I don't know about you, Quinton, but I've encountered cases where the kids were making everything up. There was investigations done and there was literally no proof of it. It was all for attention because mom took away my iPod or whatever it is. Are iPods still a thing? iPads? Listen, I just learned what TikTok was like 3 months ago. So
listen, same. Listen, it's not a judgment.
I can't stop.
It's a little judgment.
No, you're like dead on with that. I mean, we're it's so difficult because it's asking to make a decision with so many unknowns. So many present and future unknowns. If they go to foster care, will it be a good foster family? Will it be a stable environment, and the type of environment that they can heal? If they stay with the family, will things get better? Will they get worse? What does the kid want? Is what they want now going to be what they want later? And yeah, I think it's really difficult.
I'm not sure about in your experience, but I find like a lot of the foster kids develop more issues like oppositional behaviors and like it just creates a bigger problem because they're fighting everyone because they just want to go home. And I think that's one of the problems too. It's really going back to like the investigation and finding out that stuff wasn't true happens like a lot more often, at least where I am, than being able to find evidence of sexual abuse or physical abuse. Like it's tough. Yeah. It's also the area that you work in has an impact too. Like I work with low income people.
Yeah. And we've had those cases in which, everything was unfounded. And then it is later admitted that, nothing really happened or it was dramatized to an extent that it wasn't. And it's difficult to, really come to a consensus on what's best.
And like, I want to add one other piece to this is that the system itself is set up to fail the kids. Like the system itself isn't adequately resourced. It's not adequately designed. It doesn't have the technology infrastructure to support it. Like I worked with a program that literally lost a kid. Like they called a year later being like, hey, where's this kid? And we're like, we transferred him over to, and gone. So like, it's not just an issue of like, the micro, it's also a macro. Like the system itself doesn't even support the possibility that we can really address these kids' needs at scale. So what you get are these like amazing social workers who are able to basically be champions for these kids and have little pods of kids they can get through the system, but they're the exception, not the rule.
Right. You know, I immediately thought of Daniel Fernandez when I saw this question. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that case, but
yes,
there's a documentary that came out. I think it's on Netflix or Hulu.
I go through a half an episode before I turn my TV off.
I honestly, and you know, I'm sure working in this, I have to kind of sparse out when I'm going to watch that stuff because it's just too much with work and then coming home and watching something on it. It's just
I can't watch that, period. I heard,
Yeah.
I think I know what you're talking about. It's the one that like actually explains the abuse, right?
Right. And, well,
Yeah.
it's just a case where pretty much every part of the system failed the kid. I mean, and they talk about from the ground level, you know, to the social workers who are working with them all the way to the very top to the lawmakers. And, you know, I think that just adds on to your point that the system isn't built to help these kids. It is built in a lot of ways where it's going to fail.
And what's so infuriating about it to me is that the technology exists and it's not massively expensive. Like one of my clients does artificial intelligence using natural language processing on social media and can predict stuff from like schizophrenia, postpartum, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, like all sorts of stuff. But like we have the technology, and like that's what always infuriates me so much. And like a lot of the work that I do, I did a bunch of work with SAP, who gave me like an amazing ability to take some of like world-class technology and apply it to mental health. Because like we have the technology to solve these issues. And like you want to get like, I'm gonna get my soapbox on this because like that's really the issue is like we have it, we can do it if we wanted to, if we wanted to put the effort into it, if we wanted to put the resources into it. And then what really gets me mad is that it costs less money to do it right. The human toll is less to do it right. But we're so intransigent in what we're doing now that it's easier to just let these kids suffer from a government standpoint than it is to say, okay, let's overhaul it and do this right. I'll put away my soapbox now.
Well, which is ironic, right? Because the ACE study showed us that the long-term cost of, you know, kids experiencing these traumas and nothing ever, you know, being done to repair it or to help them work through it and process it, that ends up in, you know, if we're just talking financial, a huge cost to both the individual and governments and other agencies.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so ironic that the funding wouldn't be put there when in the long run, it is going to cost us way less. And that's excluding the human toll, like you said.
That's something that I've seen in a lot of the programs that I've been working on is that I can't just come in and say, here's the human toll. And I can't just come in and say, okay, well, it's going to save you money. For some of my clients, I've had to build literal calculators to say, this is how much money you will save by doing this early intervention. And like, I'm not a math whiz. Like these are Excel spreadsheets of events, you know, incidence rates, et cetera. And how do we divert? How do we get these diversions? And like, that's one of the big things that I talk about is like, so let's divert earlier in the system. And then we can identify some key metrics that are very low to the ground and easy to understand. And the impact is huge. All the other like intangibles, you can't even track, but it's just massive how much lives how much money could be saved, how many more productive people, like all, like I don't know what the words are, but like such happier, more fulfilling lives. But people have to learn, especially in this industry, how to present things so that you get, I call it both sides of the aisle. So it's the human impact and it's the fiscal impact, and they're presented in a way where it's like, do we want to save this orphanage from burning? Yeah, like everybody gets on board with it once you can communicate it in the right way.
Right.
This is my soapbox. I get very passionate about this stuff. So
Where does she keep going? There she is.
Hey guys, so I think we have some technical delays going on today, but I think Marie will be jumping back in a second. Here she is.
I don't think anybody else can hear it, but so what happens is sometimes I am treated to this deafening So all of you go completely mute. I can't hear you, and that's all I can hear. And it's very clear nobody else can hear it. So I feel like I'm in my own personal hell. So I appreciate everybody being patient with me. And I wanted to actually take a moment to go through all of our comments everywhere. So let us, if that's okay with everybody, thank you for being patient with me again. Let's go through. Okay, so we have, I can see, oh boy, okay, I'm just going to read through what I have here. So for question number 3, Spider Kid said, I think it depends on the situation. If not all family members are abusive, maybe it's better to stay with somebody who is not. Then also I messed up. I said that our producer is managing the social media, and I did not give credit to Michelle. Michelle, thank you so much for your work on the social media front. Clearly I'm not Rudy, and it's really showing tonight. Okay, Katie Gordon says, if the relationship can be repaired, that can be a powerful part of the healing process. However, sometimes it can't be, and it's healthier to remove the hurtful person from your life. And I absolutely agree with that. Then Grace Durbin has said, severing the relationship is just not always an option. And I totally agree with that, especially, when we're talking again about kids who are much younger. Like that's not an option. And I believe that's all that I'm seeing. So I hope I didn't miss anything. Hudson posted a little thing. The first rule of mental health, learn to distinguish who deserves an explanation, who deserves only one answer, and who deserves absolutely nothing. I love that. I love that a lot. Let's go over to question number 4, since we are mildly behind in answering it. Question number 4 is, how do we ensure that childhood trauma does not lead to suicide in adulthood? And Quinton, if we could start with you.
Yeah. Gosh, I think there's so many parts to this. One of them we talked about was early intervention. I think that's huge because if you could start addressing it early, providing coping skills, processing whatever is needed, again, you're going to mitigate long-term effects. And then, either with that or without that, then I think having the resources available for people who are having mental health problems or suffering due to trauma, and then awareness. Awareness is a huge one. Educating and raising awareness on the effects that trauma can have, both emotional, mental, and even the physical effects. And that something can be done about it so that those effects can be, avoided.
Got it. Hudson?
Destigmatization, like normalize it, like make it super normal to talk about when you're sad. Make it super normal for friends to talk about it. Like I had lunch today with a friend who shared with me like some very personal stuff, and like there's a bunch of different sides of this, but like I always try and yes and my kids. So like if they're like, oh, I thought this or I feel this, like yes, and why? Or try and like get those active listening in with kids. And like I know this is a very broad issue, but like that's what I try and do is I try and talk to my kids about it. I try and encourage them to talk about it. And then I think if we really made mental health first aid, mental health stuff normalized at the elementary level, we'd help a lot. Like I did some work in the South, and like they had we met with a college, and like there was zero awareness of mental health for an entire student body. Like 600 or 700 kids. It wasn't just like stigma. There's like, yeah, we don't need that. At college, like we know that that's when they need it. And so like I think a lot of this is really culturally sensitive, accessible, and really persistent normalization of talking about like mental health and how you feel and what's going on, and being comfortable to share what you want when you want, but making that normal. And I think that's something that will really help at that young age, that it's okay to talk about what's happening to you.
Danielle?
I mean, what am I supposed to say that wasn't already said?
More metal, more death metal for kids.
I can get on board with that.
Yeah,
actually,
listen.
It's really funny. I did get one of my old kids into metal as a coping skill, and by the time I discharged, the kid was listening to Slayer, and it was the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Slayer is an intervention for suicide prevention. I like it. But like, let me think for a second here. I used to participate in this program with NAMI, where I went into the middle schools and the high schools, and we did education on, like warning signs and talking about your feelings. And then I would talk to them about how, like, I got through middle and high school. My first attempt came when I was in eighth grade. I lost my first friend to suicide 3 weeks after my first suicide attempt. And I think that hearing the stories from people who've experienced it was very helpful to them. A lot of the kids would come up to me after the fact and be like, and this was even before I was working as a therapist. They would be like, well, so how did you tell your mom and dad? Whatever. They just need people that can understand them. And like, as a therapist, I know Quinton will agree with me, is you have to meet people where they are. And that means, being a kid to a certain degree. It's give them what you needed when you were their age too, if you're capable of doing that. So I agree. It just needs to keep being talked about and educated about. I don't know. I just lost my train of thought completely.
You were on a roll, though. Your train of thought was going places.
I did not drink enough coffee today. I'm trying to cut back on coffee, and so I think my brain is shutting down.
I mean, it's probably for better, right? With the hour we lost and like going to bed and all that junk.
She was going through a bag of coffee a day.
Oh,
okay. Make fun of me for that.
Oh my God.
Okay.
We really do have a lot in common.
Oh my God.
I practically live off coffee.
I think we all do in our field, though. My own therapist told me I don't drink enough coffee.
No.
Oh my God.
That is not true.
Dr. Steve told me that by the time I'm finished with my PhD, I should be like 9 to 12 cups of coffee a day. He wasn't being serious.
Are you sure? Because I'm worried you took him seriously anyway.
He did.
I took him seriously, and I started pounding the back. But it is like 60-something degrees. So that nice coffee. I'm finishing. What did you say?
I said you're down to 11 cups. Like you brought it down like 8%.
I've only had one today.
See,
is that a big gulp full of coffee?
It's
a Dunkin' cup.
Donuts.
Duh.
See, but I heard,
Just for the record.
I heard that many cups, and I was like, you know what? I bet I could do that.
Like, challenge accepted.
Don't get me wrong. Have you guys ever done the bulletproof coffees, like the ghee and the MCT?
No.
No.
Oh, yeah. So I can do a big one of those and like good to go until like noon or 1 o'clock. Like, it's amazing.
See, I don't have my first cup until the midday, like the middle of the day. Like 1 o'clock is my first cup of coffee because I'm like, oh wait, I've been awake for several hours. I'm dying. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So 9 cups today?
I'm
Just
once again
one.
hearing the hissing, so I don't know if you all are talking and having a good time, because I'm not. It's hell in my ears. Yeah. But we are here to talk about, hold on. Let's see. I'm making sure we didn't miss anything. Katie Gordon says, provide resources to trauma survivors so that they can thrive. Therapy, affordable housing, quality healthcare, stable employment with accommodations if needed, and support without stigma. Right. Just making sure, making people aware. Something that I think is really important to me is in some schools in New Jersey and New York, they've made it mandatory that there's mental health first aid education, and then mental health awareness is brought into health classes, which is like over freaking due.
That's what
That was one of the first times that I figured out that I had an eating disorder, is because somebody talked about it in a health class that I was in, and they were like, "Hey, it's not okay that you're doing that." So super, super important. And I totally agree with that. Let's get into final thoughts. Quinton, what do you think?
Final thoughts on this question? Or all together? Am I packaging the whole thing?
I think we lost her again. Do your final thoughts on the question.
Yeah, so I think pretty much everything that everyone added is a part of it, is a piece of it. And I like the destigmatization. I think making it something normal to talk about and something to be open about. Not only, does that allow us to talk about it, but then early on, we learn how to express feelings and how to connect with support. Things that we otherwise may not learn if we feel like it's taboo to touch on serious topics like that. And so I really liked that part of it, but I think all of it is incredibly important.
All right. How do you feel? How do you feel about the fact? Oh, there we go. Hello.
We can keep the camera on me. I'm okay with that. I like the attention.
Listen, whatever works that I can continue refreshing so that the sound goes away. It goes away once I refresh, but I have to.
It's nice to have a fellow beardo. Usually it's just me all by myself.
You poor thing. That's what's missing from the show is more beards.
You're punchy today. I like this.
I'm punchy because I'm angry at technology.
Yeah. Final thoughts. I think one of the things that I like to share, especially about this particular topic, is how poor mental health and suicide education is in our elementary school system. How many of you out there had school counselors when you were kids? I tried. Yeah. The largest school counselor program in the country, graduate program, closed like 10 years ago. And so with all the cuts in funding, you saw literally the only resource for a lot of schools to get disappeared. There's some counselor programs coming back, but like states like Michigan, suicide education and training, not even mandatory. It's optional. And so something I would say as you're looking at this issue is, the early screening, the early interventions, but really look at what you're teaching your kids. Look at what your schools are teaching your kids. And if you don't like it, there's gobs of resources out there. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, the American Association of Suicidology, the Zero Suicide Institute. Like I can go on and on. There's regional organizations. There's local. Get people into your schools and get them to talk about it to kids. Kids die by suicide. It's the second highest rate of death for kids. And we have a duty to do better by them in what we're teaching in the schools.
That's a really good point. Actually, I tried to go to a counselor for my issues in high school, and they literally didn't have time for me.
Yeah.
So I would like come sit in her office, and she would be somewhere else, and then maybe she'd come back, and it would be 10 minutes left in our session, and I was thirsty for it. I would take it because I needed to talk to somebody, and I couldn't possibly ever talk to anybody outside of then because I didn't have the resources. So we had one counselor, and I grew up in a very affluent town. So that is if that's indicative of the rest of the country, we're screwed.
Most schools don't have them at all anymore.
Yeah.
Before I was a therapist, I was a teacher, and they had the school counselors, but they weren't trained in mental health. It was like administrative stuff. Mm-hmm. That was primarily what they did, scheduling and everything.
Oh, great. That's helpful. That's very important. Somebody needs to do that, of course, and get a master's degree to do that. Danielle, what are your final thoughts?
That I hate the school counselors I had growing up because you guys just triggered some memories. They all told me I was going to be dead before I was 18, never graduate high school. And here I am.
That's helpful.
What?
Yeah. That's helpful.
They were so completely unsupportive. They told my parents to medicate the shit out of me, which my father was but my phone will not stop going off. Sorry, guys. Yeah. I totally don't remember what I was about to say.
Counselors, you hated them. Final thoughts.
So my final thoughts, someone just texted me and said that there's someone on Periscope asking how much caffeine I have every single day. And if I take caffeine pills, and the answer is no. I drink a lot of water during the day and 1 to maybe 3 cups of coffee a day. They're just 2 cups of coffee, if that answers the question. So that was my final thought. I am not very caffeinated right now.
Thank you, everybody who's on. By the way, we got Mixer back with 20 minutes left in the show. So
hey, anxiety, I have a special guest.
Bring it! Bring the piggies! No, not that one. I want to see the real one. Get that one off the screen.
Say hello, Hamlet.
Hamlet.
Hello. He has been a very naughty boy this week. He's opened up lots of packages. And he's learned how to flip things over that are much larger than he is. And he's just been very naughty. Been very cute though. Say hi everybody. Follow me at Sir Hamlet Pig on Instagram for all of my misadventures.
Oh my gosh.
I'm doing
I
that
don't
right
see
now.
a problem in the pig opening packages. It's less work for you. He's just trying to help.
Except when he ate 8 packages of mints.
Right. Well, why are you ordering 8 packages of
I have kids. Life is complex. He bargained for mints. I ordered mints. He ate all of the mints.
The piggy update was fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Hamlet.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay.
I love him.
Who doesn't? How could you not love this pig? He's like the best thing since sliced bacon. Dark humor. All right. My closing thoughts are these are absolutely lovely humans. I can't wait for Rudy to come back. Although he just handles technology issues a lot more gracefully than I do. So, Dad, if you hear this, the house is on fire. We might have flooded the toilet. We need you back. Come home soon. We love you. And thank you, everybody. Everybody, can we get everybody back on the screen? Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. Quinton, Danielle, Hudson, you guys are fantastic. Hamlet, Ham. Have a wonderful rest of your night. And don't forget to... Am I pausing sufficiently? Is that enough of a pause?
I would call that a pregnant pause.
It's about to deliver. Keep your piggy safe. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody.